Afternoon. You have to pardon my voice. I'm a little under the weather, but this is the Leon Trotsky podcast from the Leon Trotsky Revolutionary Newsletter at Substack.com. I'm joined today with Seth Strum, formerly the co-chair of the West Virginia Caucus for Indigenous People and full-time activist. And we're going to talk about the strategic failure of the DNC, specifically in small elections, and how racism and structural marginalizing minorities is playing into that problem. Good afternoon, Seth.
Good afternoon, Connor. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to have everyone back. I haven't done a podcast in a while. I'm excited.
Oh, well, then great. I'm glad to be here when you're making a comeback, so to speak.
So I was reading your new article. Let me get that up. Oh, we want the slide one. Here it is. The tale of two parties. Very Dickensian of you to use old Charles. And you were talking about how the diversity mandates in the Alabama and West Virginia show challenges to the leadership of the parties, but their response wasn't to bring up minorities and have them, state their case. It was to drown them out with more white people, even if they weren't members of the caucuses themselves. Am I correct?
So this is I've been trying to get this story down. Let me move my microphone here a little bit so I can sit more in front of the camera. I've been trying to get this story out there. And it came from my perspective from being in the West Virginia Democratic Party's Indigenous Caucus. I was the first chair whenever it came into being in June of 2021, July 2021, somewhere in that area. And so my experience is kind of led me down this road to what I've discovered is a problem, across the country in a lot of red states. But we specifically look at Alabama and West Virginia because what happened here, it's a perfect parallel. Both states in 2019 and 2020, respectively, were ordered by the DNC's Rules and Bylaws Committee to mandate affirmative action initiatives. So each state had to form these diversity caucuses and an affirmative action committee within the Democratic Party. West Virginia modeled theirs off of Alabama explicitly. I have emails from a lot of different leaders saying we're using Alabama as our structure because Alabama got it right. So now we see, so that's what happened. Both states, very similar programs modeled off of each other, both mandated by the RBC. So this is why it's a perfect study of the different approach in the way that minorities are treated, because in Alabama, Black party leaders hold significantly more power because there's a larger Black population in Alabama than there is in West Virginia. So what we saw in West Virginia for the past 2 years, 3 years now almost, Black and Indigenous party leaders, myself and Mary Ann Claytor most notably, have been bringing forward all of these accusations of discrimination and systemic issues and procedural misconduct that we've been experiencing within the West Virginia Democratic Party. And we're not really getting a lot of progress. And in September of 2022, the Indigenous Caucus Executive Board, inappropriately, by the way, this is a mistake on my part, we voted to disband without letting the caucus have a say. But the party jumped on that and took our own procedural misconduct and said, okay, no more Indigenous caucus. So the Indigenous caucus went away. The Indigenous caucus members had no say in it whatsoever. So we wanted to get that fixed. Now in Alabama, Black party leaders concerned about the influence of outsiders from the DNC coming into these diversity caucuses and weaponizing them like they were in West Virginia. They wanted to say that they wanted to make a change in the structure of their affirmative action committee and the way diversity caucus had powers within the committee. So earlier in 2023, the executive committee of the Alabama Democratic Party voted to remove certain caucuses altogether and change others into councils, non-voting councils within their affirmative action committee. This led to a challenge being filed by the vice chair of the party to the Rules and Bylaws Committee, and the DNC immediately came in, did a full investigation. The Alabama Democratic Party has until February of this year to make bylaws changes that comply with their orders. And so what we have is this situation, and let me go back and say that in West Virginia, our continued effort, so this happened in early 2023, and the DNC stepped in swiftly. mandated that diversity is what they're all about and that they can't do this. Stop Black party leaders from doing internal, from what's the word I want to look for? From managing their own internal party politics, right? And in West Virginia, where they are keeping the Indigenous Caucus from holding new elections and organizing within the party structure, the DNC and the WVDP keep throwing procedural hurdles at us and saying that we have to exhaust all of your internal processes, which is just not something that they did in Alabama. So what we're seeing here is that in 2 states, you have Black and minority representation saying something's wrong with our affirmative action committees, our affirmative action initiatives. And in both cases, the DNC came in, sides with white leadership, and squashes the Black leadership, I guess, for lack of a better word. But in this instance, it feels like leadership is inappropriate because we don't have the same powers when we get power that white folks do. So when these Black party leaders take over the party and have control of the executive committee, well, the DNC is going to step in and say, your executive committee doesn't have the right to do that. In West Virginia, where white folks have control of the executive committee and they're illegally keeping the Indigenous Caucus from being rightfully recognized, the DNC comes in and says, no, they have the power to do that, and we would be inappropriate for stepping in. So there's just paternalized attitude towards racialized people that's obvious. And in this situation, these 2 almost identical situations being handled so differently based upon, and I mean, I don't see any other way to look at this, they come down on the side of the privileged and always against those who are being marginalized, trying to fight for our rights. And it just, grassroots means, organically growing up. And when the DNC gets involved in state level party politics, especially in red states where we're really trying to oppose the GOP and all the things that they're doing here, it's different if you're in a blue state, it's not as dire to, that's where I think a lot of third party activism is taking place. And I'm not a big time Democratic Party guy. I'm not a loyalist by any means, but in West Virginia, something's got to be done because we have a supermajority GOP that's passing dangerous legislation, deregulations, targeting trans people. It's just not a good situation. So we kind of need to have a strong Democratic Party here or third party that rises up. But I find myself in the Democratic Party doing the fighting. And I think that if the DNC says in Alabama, diversity is our main goal, and in West Virginia, they say procedure is our priority here, we have to ask why. We have to ask what the situation is behind the scenes and why these leaders are taking such different approaches. So I think that's what I hope that's understandable. I hope that I've broken it down pretty easily for people to get. But it's pretty shocking to me to watch it.
Yes, that is shocking. Oh, excuse me. But what I was also curious about is how this plays out in this overall strategy the Democrats have. It seems that the Democratic Party has been fixated for the last at least 2 decades, maybe 3, on big executive branch victories. White House, governors, those kinds of things. State houses to a certain degree, and the legislative branch to a lesser degree. But it's always those prestige pieces, and we're missing out those smaller pieces that the Republicans have taken over, because of their grassroots approach that they started in the 1980s with guys like the Koch brothers and how they funded things like libertarians and all these other people to move up through the grassroots, like school boards, state auditors, people that have actual control over money at the most basic level in most everybody's life. They want to get. And they let, the bigger parties, they let that jockey around for a couple decades, on the top, and they didn't really, that was more the show. And I think that really explains the reason why the DNC comes down and likes these, in Black communities. They know they're going to lose a lot of Blacks to non-voting, right? I mean, they might not vote GOP. They probably aren't going to vote third party, but they certainly are. They're going to just sit that one out every once in a while. And if they do that, they lose their key positions in, the state houses, the big spots, and most importantly, the governorships. And that's what I think is going on here. And so in your case, you're a minority group that they can choose to ignore. because they feel they have nowhere else to go.
I think that honestly, they can, in West Virginia especially, we're talking about, we're such a small population, and West Virginia is so strategically unimportant. They don't view us as a priority. I think that a lot of the DNC level stuff, but then I go to the question of why in Alabama take the time. I mean, there's a lot of time spent here even still. So that's what kind of confuses me. Part of me says, I understand what you're saying, but there seems to be an interest in keeping control over these parties internally, but there's no interest in helping grow the party in these red states. So like you mentioned these offices, they dedicated so much time and money to Joe Manchin and allowing Joe Manchin to run as a center-right candidate that they abandoned the Democratic Party principles and platform. The platform of the party in 2016, the West Virginia Democratic Party passed one of the most progressive platforms that in the country. Didn't matter. None of that became culture. You know, it was not something they actually pushed.
Isn't that one of the bills that Joe pretended to shoot up with his shotgun during one of his ads?
That was, I feel like that was the Affordable Care Act.
It was that, but I thought he did another ad for local where he shot up or he, dismissed the West Virginia political party's platform and said that he was not going to be anywhere near that, so don't worry.
I don't remember that, but so I can't speak to it, but it wouldn't surprise me. The state party spent $100,000 to send mailers out saying Joe Manchin votes with Trump. They abandoned the people, the marginalized people, to win these big elections. So that, to speak to what you're talking about, their interest in the larger, flashier elections, that's absolutely true. To the extent that in West Virginia, we've lost all of the constitutional offices, the governor, state auditor, attorney general, all of them, they're gone now. We used to have all of them before 2014. We have none of them now. 2016, we saw major losses and we keep losing. The state house, in 2014, we had a majority. There were only a handful of Republicans in each house. But now we have, I think, 9 members of the House out of 100 and 2 senators out of 34. The party has lost all of its power, all of its influence, everything that they had in this state at one point in just 30 years. And it all comes back to chasing Republicans. So you're talking about the grassroots initiatives to push parties to the right. Well, it started working. You see people like Joe Manchin in the 90s, pro-labor candidate Charlotte Pritt wins the gubernatorial candidacy here in West Virginia for the Democrats. And Joe Manchin goes and resurrects this old 1970s group called Democrats for Underwood to support the Republican candidate. And since that time, you could see that the West Virginia Democratic Party has always been in the pocket of big business. Hell, when Joe Manchin was governor of the state, all of the signs coming into West Virginia, they say wild and wonderful, West Virginia. When he was governor, he changed all of those signs to say West Virginia, open for business.
Yeah.
Well, you can't make this up. So we're watching the Democratic Party abandon the pillars of the party, which are the marginalized people who really need an opposition party to the GOP. And when we're running to the right and we're capitulating to them constantly, you're going to start to lose support. Look at how Joe Biden is losing numbers from the young people, Black voters, Hispanic voters, Muslim voters. That's one where he's really leeching a lot of support right now. I don't understand. So to me, if they're willing to lose all of these key constituencies and they keep doing these policies that marginalize and put us off, well, at a certain point, you have to accept the fact that they're going to take a turn into running and trying to embrace more white folks. I think they're counting on not voting. Whenever you talk about they think that we're not going to vote rather than vote for someone else, right? Or somebody that could damage them. And I think that they're okay with that if they could secure the votes from white folks. They're just marginalizing and sidelining and silencing us. And they're okay with it so long as they can find a way to continue to win some elections and continue to get their funding. We are talking about policies that are failing a large swath. I mean, people can see this. Our country, our democracy isn't strong, right? So we need people to really start to pay attention, because if you do focus on these flashy things, we're not going to get any wins. We have to go back down to that level of local activism. Like I keep telling people, we need a civic revival in this country. I grew up in a very Christian kind of world, right? So revival was a big thing for the evangelicals. It's a moment to go in there and get the spirit going again. We need that in this country where people come back to the table. Stop just saying, well, it's already predetermined. You can be something that makes a change. It really does just take a few people. We're watching in West Virginia, the entire party being taken over and people being subjected to this kind of marginalization I'm talking about by just a handful of actors. You know, they're able to consolidate this power in these small, because nobody cares about internal party politics. But that's how a lot of the things that we see out there in the elections come to fruition, is what happens in those party politics. So I actually think a lot of the disdain people have for the Democratic Party might be real. But to me, you're giving up on the hegemonic power that they have. Hegemonic, I don't know how to pronounce it.
No, that's right.
That power that they have in this institution, you're just giving it up whenever it will just take. I mean, honestly, in West Virginia, if we could get 150 good people together to start coming to meetings, you take the party over. These people are not organized. It's a terribly organized party because no one cares. And that's the thing that's got to change. And that's what I hope to draw attention, is to get people. Yeah, the Democratic Party is an institution that you don't trust. It's something that you already believe is racist. Here's proof. Come fight for something better. And if you just let them have it, well, I mean, we're at a loss. We're in a place where people are dying because of the policies. And I just think that I don't want to say ideological purity or put down anybody who's working for a third party. That's valid. If that's what you're doing, I support you in that effort. At the same time, we have to understand that most people aren't political activists, and that some people out there, they're the ones I'm speaking to. I'm not trying to convert people away from what they're doing. I want to make that clear. But people out there who are disenfranchised, disillusioned, there is hope, but you have to be able to come into the system and stand up. Because what we see now is people that are they're not willing to do it because their position is fragile. You come forward and you're targeted with these attacks, with this harassment, and people's reputations are smeared and ruined, and people are scared. I get calls all the time from people on the executive committee. They'll say, hey, listen, I support you. What you're doing, I want you to continue doing. I cannot publicly support you, though. And the people who have kind of...
Well, what good is that, then?
It's not.
I mean...
But this is the point. So that's
at some point you gotta stand up and say, yes, I support it, and I'm going to take the heat for that, and it's the right thing to do, and then you'll see change.
That's why I'm trying to build up a movement behind me to make these changes, because these people, they know there's a problem. They see that there's a problem, so they have to be encouraged. I don't want to put those people necessarily down, because it is scary, because they will lie about you. I had one of these people tell everybody that she could. I had people contacting me saying, have you heard this? That she was afraid I was going to come 4 hours away from my home and commit an act of violence against her. But that implication is something that doesn't go away. People will say, oh my goodness, that's scary. He's dangerous. I shouldn't associate with him. And that's something that's being done to everybody. I mean, so mine might be an extreme example, but I mean, even folks who stand up, they become social pariahs. And honestly, that's a really strong deterrent.
Oh, but
it shouldn't be. People have to understand political parties are so important to everyday life. It's not a social club. It's not even a business. People say, well, you have to act professionally. You have to conduct to a certain extent. You should try. But if you're at a point where people are actively harming others and causing pain and people's lives to be not lived in the best possible way, or actually take lives, well, civility's out the window then. We have to do something drastic. We have to stand up. We have to make a scene, because these political parties have way too much power. And so that's why I fight from the inside, is because I just see the power that they have. And I don't want to cede that to people who I know are bigoted, racist, and are willing to do harm to people in order to get ahead for themselves. That's what we're standing up against.
Well, those are all good things, and I agree with you for fighting that. And I agree that an institutional insurrection is probably your best bet if it's disorganized, as you say, because essentially what they've been doing for all these years is just allowing the smaller state parties to, disintegrate, so that they can control them more easily from the top. I mean, they're not strong. They can't push back. They can't, when they pushed back against Manchin, what happened to them? Those Manchin push for Republicans.
Well,
And
and
probably-
honestly, here's the other thing too. So take a look at that instance where Manchin is able to go out there and support Republicans and put down Democrats. In 2018, Mary Ann Claytor, chair of the Black Caucus in West Virginia, she was the press secretary for the Federation of Democratic Women.
Mhm.
She wrote a great article. I encourage everyone. I'll share it on my Twitter or something. I encourage everyone to go read it. 2018, she wrote an article, an op-ed to this newspaper in West Virginia, and in it, she called out the Democratic Party and said, with the devil at the head of the table, basically we would never get ahead, right? She called him the devil at the head of the table. And she was talking about Joe Manchin. It was an anti-Joe Manchin piece. And because of that, she was cited for disharmony, disloyalty, and the Federation of Women kicked her off. Just kicked her off completely. So we have in one instance where the party says there are no loyalty tests. And then in another instance, when you speak out against their most prominent Democrat, who, by the way, is hurting the Democratic Party, which is what she was trying to call out, then you're punished.
But he only hurt the state Democratic Party. He maintained his own seat. So he kept the more important seat, they felt.
Right. They've absolutely destroyed. The reason you're seeing so many losses is because the DNC has allowed red states to kind of fend for themselves, especially in Joe Manchin's case, especially if they can deliver a win for them in a larger picture, nationally, let's say. Yeah. Right. So whenever that happens, everything in they don't care about West Virginia. They don't care about the people in West Virginia. Just listen to how people talk about people living in red states. This is what we're talking about. There are marginalized people living in West Virginia right now that have no way out. There's no escaping it. We don't just get to leave. This is our home too. So what we're doing is actively living in a
More importantly, you shouldn't have to leave if you like it. That's the real argument, I mean,
that's very true.
It should be livable for everyone, not just, well, if you don't like it, leave. That's the dumbest thing I ever,
Right, but people don't understand that we're here. Even me. So I'm biracial. I am clearly white passing. I have been the most open and honest about this. People have to. So there's two conversations here about colorism. There's one from people who every day are racialized because they are obviously not white, and then there's the conversation from white people who take this very real grievance that they had and take it and turn it on themselves. So I have white people in West Virginia and nationally. There's been very specific incident I'm thinking about, but these people have said, Seth is white. He doesn't represent indigenous people. Here's the thing. When you're from these communities, when you are indigenous, once people find out, that's when you see the rate. It's not because you look a certain way. It's because they really believe you're below them. They believe indigenous people aren't equal. So it doesn't matter that I'm white passing. I'm standing up for the people who aren't, first of all, in West Virginia, because that's what I was elected to do. And in West Virginia, it's hard to find people, any racial people that want to be involved in anything. I've tried to recruit people, and we've got a nice little caucus, but it's not that big. It's just the reality here. But to say that because people who are, my grandmother is full-blooded Navajo. She's in the caucus. It's not like I am the representative of everybody behind me that they've chosen to speak for. So it's like this thing where they erase everybody else because of how I look. But my identity isn't tied to that. I am a member of the Navajo Nation. I know my family out there. When COVID hit, I lost 20 members of that family out there.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
It's a tragedy. It's one of the worst. It's horrible, right? But that doesn't matter. It's Seth, you're white. And it's just crazy to me that they want to erase this. And so they take my identity and how I look and are erasing everybody in West Virginia who fits this indigenous identity. That's not right.
No, it's not.
So that's what I'm talking about. The weaponization of the language of liberation. They take our words, our struggles, and they use it against us. These people tell me that I don't understand discrimination because they don't think I look dark enough. It's nonsensical, and it's racist when these white folks do that. And then it makes it even worse when they use that to further sideline and marginalize the people within the caucus. And so if the DNC cares about diversity and inclusion, what about the fact that this caucus that I was the head of, we had 10 active members. we are one of the smallest populations that was given a caucus, marginalized populations given a caucus. Per capita, we have more members than any caucus could dream of having. Most of the other caucuses don't have 10 active members. And we're talking about groups like the LGBTQ caucus, the senior caucus, where more than half, the senior caucus, almost 40% of the population of West Virginia would fit that bill, right? And we're talking about 0.1% of the population having a caucus that's more active, more alive. And they shut us down. The party is dying, and they shut down diverse voices who were willing to put in the work to make it bigger, to make it better, to find new candidates, to work for those candidates to help them get wins. They say, no, we don't want Seth Sturm to be out there doing this. We're going to try to shut that down because we have something that, that doesn't align with that. And this caucus is making too much noise for what our goals are. I mean, there's no other way to look at this in terms of why continue to sideline the Indigenous Caucus in West Virginia, other than the past 2 years of discrimination and not wanting that to really become an issue. I mean, if we have to start addressing and holding people accountable, if this becomes a real issue for them, the DNC especially, people will have to be held accountable. We have to make real changes. And so that's just something they would rather sweep under the rug, especially at an election time. So we're in this situation now where the marginalization, the sidelining, the discrimination that has been illegally being done in West Virginia is now being legitimized by the DNC. And honestly, we're getting to the point where, what's going to have to give? Are we going to have to continue just to fight for our basic right to even participate in party affairs whenever that's the key issue that they cited whenever they started these caucuses in the first place was the lack of participation, was the fact that it wasn't an open party. None of this makes sense logically when you start looking at it, when you start diving into the specifics of what they say they want versus the actions they take. It becomes clear that we're dealing with systemic oppression and marginalization, discrimination, targeted harassment that is being accepted by the highest level DNC leadership. It's not like I'm not communicating with these people. Vice Chair Ken Martin of the DNC offered to come to West Virginia to oversee mediation between the party and the caucus in the DNC. It just didn't come to fruition because one of the reasons I think is because I told him that I wouldn't participate in any mediation that didn't involve all of the people who are claiming these same things. That was the trans community. That was the Black community. I wanted representatives from those two groups to be involved in any mediation, and they pulled it. Wasn't a choice. So there's no real effort to have diversity. We could have taken care of this internally, quietly, just made sure that we had a party that worked with people and made sure that diverse voices had a place to be heard. Instead, here we are. It just doesn't make any sense to me that we have to be put in this position in the first place. So I don't understand what's going on. That's kind of the thing, is like logically we could make up all of these excuses, but at the end of the day, we have this major institution, the DNC, that is selectively engaging with state parties. And it seems to be that when they do, marginalized minorities are subjugated and treated unfairly.
Well,
it just doesn't track.
Isn't some of the marginalization due to the fact that you've recently had several Democratic members turn Republican all of a sudden?
This is very important.
I mean,
in West Virginia, the people we're alleging that I say have done all of this stuff, one of them has donated. We have lost, by the way. I mean, locally, when we're talking about the county commissioners, county clerks, those kind of things, they're leaving in droves. I'm talking, Democrats, longtime Democrats, they say, well, I'm not going to win if I'm a Democrat. And so they just switch over. We had a representative earlier this year, Elliot Pritt. He switched parties because he didn't like the fact that he couldn't vote against trans children without getting pushback from his constituents. So he said, no, I'm a Republican then. Here's the thing. The people that I'm alleging have a problem with trans folks within the West Virginia Democratic Party. One of them is Selena Vickers, who has been accused by multiple people of different discriminatory actions. She donated to Elliot Pritt, who switched to Republican because of his trans position. She donated to his campaign in 2022. Okay. We have a women's caucus that Selena Vickers is the chair of. And in their official affirmative action plan for the Democratic Party, they're pushing people to this nonprofit organization that her friend runs called West Virginia Can't Wait. West Virginia Can't Wait works nonpartisan. They work with independents. They work with Republicans. They work with anybody. And so you have the Democratic Party who's losing tons of candidates to the Republican Party. You're having the Democratic Party pushing them officially to a group that is ostensibly working with the Republican Party as well. So there's this major malfeasance here. There's this dereliction of duties of allowing our institution, our Democratic Party, to promote these other candidates and these other causes. That is doing a disservice to us. So, I mean, listen, I get it. People don't like the Democratic Party, but me as a Democratic Party official trying to fight in West Virginia, seeing our elected Democrats like Jim Justice, our governor, do it, like Elliot Pritt did it earlier this year, like all the county clerks, county commissioners are doing it now. We're seeing them switch over to this party. So to have our party pushing people to an organization that is pushing a lot of Republicans just doesn't make sense. And the DNC knows this. I've brought this issue up. I've written about it on my Substack. This is something they know, they understand, but they've also said, don't care. Apparently, that's I mean, I don't know how else to read it, because that's what we're trying to fight. We're trying to fight for a strong Democratic Party in West Virginia. And it's impossible because there's a handful of people here who are bound and determined to just, control everything. And that kind of tight control just doesn't seem to be conducive to an environment where diverse voices get to come in and there's real discussion. I mean, that's the other thing. We have this deliberative body, the executive committee of the Democratic Party. They're not able to discuss things. Things are brought in, and just this past December, Mary Ann Claytor tried to make a motion about the Indigenous Caucus, and she was told that motion was out of order, and they wouldn't discuss it. So, it's just the situation we're in where there's this top-down approach, this authoritarian kind of take on internal processes, and it's really you're going to see a lot more problems coming up, and it's not going to be just in West Virginia, because this is clearly a problem across the country.
True. And so that brought me back to your article, and especially this section where you talk about the hypocrisy that's been revealed, with the way that they're treating Black candidates, especially ones in lower demographic states like your own and your own ethnic group, the Native Americans. And it seems to me that essentially what we're seeing here is that they're willing to gut the whole party, lose absolutely every instance of power in the actual state, so long as they can maintain a few key token figures at the top, a governorship here, a senator, a representative, a few key strategic ones. They feel that they can, say, oh, well, we're not totally out of the red state business.
That's exactly right. And, I don't know if I'm sure everybody remembers this. In 2016, there were red states that Hillary Clinton just didn't even go to. She didn't make one appearance in them.
There were blue states she didn't go to, like Michigan.
That's very okay. Fair. My point is, they clearly don't have an interest in having all 50 states participate and have equal footing. You can see this in the way that the primaries are set up and where they spend all of their money. We've got a problem in this country. And then, it's really problematic too, because just go back and look when Bernie Sanders was running, and they have they go to South Carolina and they say, look at the numbers, Black party leaders, Black Democrats, they support Joe Biden. And where's that at now? Where's the support back for marginalized communities? Where is that? Because you want to use us to signal that, hey, no one else is as good as us because we care about you. But then when push comes to shove, it's just silence. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And then, it's really disheartening whenever you get these. I don't know. I'll hold off on that one.
Well, there's a lot of problems with that strategy they're using. Because it basically says to the voter, oh, you have nowhere else to go. So even if we're bad, we're not as bad as the other guy. And we saw what happened in 2016. People said, I'm tired of that. I'll either not vote or what the hell, I'll give it to the bad guy. See what happens then.
And I don't think a lot of people believe this, but I do, and that you're witnessing Trump use more and more outright Nazi rhetoric in his speeches. The element of people who are supporting him, I think it's, what was it, a third of Americans right now, U.S. adults, believe that the election in 2020 was illegitimate. We've got a problem here, people. I mean, I don't think the Democrats are fully grasping the fact that you can't stick your head in the sand and say, hey, it's okay. Another great example of this is the economy right now, the discussion surrounding the economy, right? We have people who are saying, why isn't Joe Biden getting the credit he deserves for the economy? Even if the economy is slightly improving from where it was in its worst moments, part of it is the disillusionment in his other policies, in the ways that he's behaving in other areas.
Well,
It's hard to it's hard to really take a look at things objectively when things are still very difficult for people, right? And even if some numbers are suggesting that improvement is happening and things are great or whatever, the rhetoric is, the issue is that people aren't necessarily feeling that, especially when they look at all these other areas and think, man, we're just not where we should be. And the people who recognize that the most are the ones living it. That's why he's leeching support in marginalized communities. And it's always these middle-class, college-educated white folks who are like, why? Why isn't Biden? And they act like it's the voter who's not understanding. Why isn't he getting credit for the economy? Are people that dumb? Or why isn't he getting credit because, clearly racism would be worse under other people. But the issue is it's not getting better under him. And that's what people notice, and that's why people are leaving this party, leaving this president behind, and it's leading into a very dangerous situation into 2024 when we don't know what's going to happen because of this apathy. And honestly, I don't know how you fix it, especially not within a year, especially not with these people digging in their heels. But it just serves as a prediction because we can see where this is going, and hopefully people will take note, see it, and start making adjustments in the future, moving forward, because a lot of things are already set in place, but we can start to make those changes. And it's kind of slow to see the progress at first, but hopefully at a certain point, we start seeing some snowball effect, because if we don't start pushing back, where do we go as a country? Where do we go when we're this split, when we're this divided, when marginalized people do not have a home? We don't have a party to go to that actually supports us in any way that isn't performative. What do you do? Especially whenever the demographics keep shifting and more minorities are growing, and the white privileged class is just shrinking. So we're getting into this stage where it's unprecedented. I don't think they're prepared for it. And I think that we're seeing a lot of chickens coming home to roost from the last 40 years of policy and strategy from the Democrats. It's a complete and total failure of Democratic Party leadership starting years ago and continuing to this day. And at some point, there's going to have to be a reckoning. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here for when that happens, because Democratic Party as an institution is not inherently evil, is not inherently bad. The structures that we have set up, the systems that we have set up are, for sure, but with the right leadership, hopefully we could get some progress in making change. Nothing's changing so long as we allow these two parties that have all of the power to remain in power with the same people. And that's what we have to organize against. We tried our best before, but we've become fractured in a lot of ways because of the losses that we've suffered. And even the leftist movement, the camaraderie we had starting in 2015, it's not there, man. That's one of the most disappointing things to me, was that at one point, whenever I was doing my Bernie Sanders podcast in 2019, where I was really hopeful. Like, I really felt a strong community. Everybody was like super loving, super supportive. Like, hey, we're in this together, and it's just not there anymore, because I think it hurts to lose, right? And so people in their desperation and saying, well, that didn't work. Well, we got to try something else. And we're just leading into a bunch of different ways. And it's sad. It's something I don't like to see. And I really hope that if we could find some moments and some places where we could catalyze support and push for something, equity within the Democratic Party should be like the easiest thing to get, considering everybody in the Democratic Party says we are social justice warriors, right? That should be the easiest thing for us to push for, and something that even the party leaders can't deny. And here's the thing, as I've said, and I'll continue to say, marginalized people should be leading this movement, because we bring in the differing perspectives. The the everyday status quo perspective is out there. It's internalized in everybody already. Those of us who are pushing back and saying this isn't right, but we're the ones with the fresh ideas at the moment. We're the ones who are seeing the problems that you are ignoring. And that's just something that you can't, it's always going to happen. And one of the things I would advocate for in the Democratic Party would be that they should push for 51% representation of minority, marginalized communities in all of their internal committees. They should not have any committees that are majority white, especially majority senior citizen white men. These things have got to come from every angle. We have got to start including more people in these conversations. I mean, look at here in West Virginia. There's not a diversity of voices. There are people on our executive committee who are holding 2, 3, 4 positions on that executive committee by, being elected, and then being appointed, and then winning officer elections within, when we should be having broader.
Was that even legal?
There's several people who do it. So I would assume that it is. So if an officer position is opened up and somebody can run for it, then somebody who was elected can run for that position. But somebody who's not on the executive committee can also run for that position, right? So if you elect the new person, then they de facto member of the committee. But if you elect the person who was already elected, then there's no new voice on the committee. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's people who are doing that kind of thing. I mean, there was a scandal. Now you want to talk about illegal. Kind of transition here just to talk about some personal stuff. In West Virginia, in September, there was elections for officers within the executive committee. This is stuff people don't care about mostly. I'm talking about it right now, and I guarantee everyone says, no, what's that matter? Well, this is the interesting part.
It structures the whole party. That's why it matters.
It really does. So these officer positions and these elected positions within the executive committee, this meeting coming in September, every meeting since the start of the pandemic has either been totally virtual or hybrid in-person virtual. For this meeting, no virtual participation was allowed, despite weeks before members started voicing concerns in email saying, COVID's really bad. I don't want to risk my life to go out and get COVID. And we've been doing virtual participate. They would not budge, did not allow virtual participation. That same the day of the meeting, the day of the first and only in-person meeting, Selena Vickers, chair of the Rules and Bylaws Committee for West Virginia Democratic Party, chair of the Women's Caucus, chair of the Affirmative Action Committee. She is also the owner and founder of A New Day PAC. That's a PAC that she's the main funder for it. Where she gets her money, I don't really know. But since last year, she's been $5,000 from her, $5,000 from her husband. She's got a nice little coffer going there. She holds an event sponsored by her PAC, and about an hour or whatever before the executive committee meeting in the same area of town, so that members of the executive committee are invited to come to her meeting. Okay. Now, I can't say what happened at this meeting because I don't know. What happened at the executive committee meeting is on record. At that meeting, there was a faction of people that came in holding multiple written proxies for other members of the committee. This has been ruled, first of all, it's against the bylaws. It's against Robert's Rules of Order. You cannot hold multiple proxies, one proxy, otherwise you get really concentrated power in one person.
Oh, sure.
It's not allowed. So the Selena Vickers said, well, it's not explicitly outlawed and blah, blah, blah. Chair Mike Pushkin of the party said, well, in thinking about inclusivity and allowing full participation of our membership, which, remember, they denied virtual participation for, which affects the same thing. He said, we're going to allow it today. There were people who had up to 4 proxies.
Wow.
And my question was this.
That's like 4 votes.
How did so many people know to get multiple proxies into this situation? It's never been done. It's never been allowed.
Shouldn't be allowed.
We had the situation where there were multiple people showing up with multiple proxies, and it was allowed. And here's the thing. Those people overwhelmingly voted in support of candidates that Selena Vickers supported. Because of the lack of transparency in her PAC and what goes on at those meetings, we don't know if she distributed written proxies to people. We don't know if she secured promises to vote for certain people before handing them out. We don't know anything. And the lack of transparency, the simple fact that somebody who is spending their own money to target members of the committee that they're on alone is some sort of at least seemingly ethical violation, if not legally.
It is an ethical violation.
I mean, it is.
And
so
the question about legal would be how the money goes through the PAC and where it's used. But it sounds like she's trying to buy off her committee, her own committee, to vote for what she wants.
And here's the other thing: is like in West Virginia. I mean, I don't think that this is actually part of the law for executive committees, but I think that it might be internally part of our rules. If you have a quorum of a committee meeting and discussing business, that's not allowed. That's you're really getting into the realm of manipulating the executive committee in a way that would go against at least the bylaws. If West Virginia open, I don't know if the executive committees are subjected to the open meetings laws, but if so, then we're in a situation where we're really pushing the legality of everything. And where's the investigation? Where is the state's attorney general? I've written them and told them about this situation. Where is anybody coming in to investigate what's going on here? We're talking about really serious allegations, and it's impacting a lot of Democrats. It's impacting a lot of people because Democrats are failing. And, we have people out here willing to fight for solutions and people standing in our way. So, that's kind of what we're trying to expose.
I mean, I think this goes great back to your point about establishing independent oversight that you talk about in your article, that there just isn't any oversight of these committees right now. Right.
There's no oversight, and there should be. And as I've said, I have a challenge that I've written that's for the Rules and Bylaws Committee of the DNC, and in it, I asked for them to help us create such a commission here in West Virginia at the very least. Right. I think it would be great if the DNC had some sort of discrimination Rules and Bylaws Committee that would investigate claims of discrimination and do something about it. It's impossible when you're in these states, when you are the minority and these people are in control. So which is more important? Because in Alabama, they said that diversity was more important than procedural rigor, right?
Okay.
So if they're saying, well, we don't want to get involved, well, maybe you should be involved when we're talking about racial equity and marginalized support. That's an area where maybe you should have oversight, because as we've seen in the past, certain areas of the country are less friendly to members of those communities. And guess what? We're the ones who need the most support. So if you want to have the strongest Democratic Party possible, you have to have accountability, and you have to start taking action when people behave in inappropriate ways.
Yes. And getting back to your economic issue with Biden, I think the big problem there is where the increase in the economy has played out. It's all been on the top. What we're seeing is the great inequality gap really becoming even more stark, because, even though the prices aren't inflating as much as they were, say, 8 months ago, the gas is still $3 instead of $2.87. The loaf of bread is $2.55 or $3 instead of $2.25. And if you're living on the same wage that you made 6 months ago, 8 months ago, it hasn't really improved that much, I mean, and when Biden comes out and says something stupid like, well, you're $100 richer now than you were last year, or this Christmas only cost you 47 cents more than last Christmas on dinner. People just think, the people that are on the bottom just know it's crap and just say, what the hell are you telling me that for? Of course I know that I'm in trouble.
It's that disconnect that's really destroying them. They cannot fathom the lives of everyday people who are dependent on there being a strong Democratic Party. Again, I understand people's dislike for the party and the institution as it is. I get that. But I want you to just put yourself in somebody's position where they're living in a state where the GOP, like here in West Virginia, they're criminalizing trans lives. They're deregulating like these things that keep us alive. We have some of the worst health rates and outcomes in the entire country, and it comes from the extraction.
I still can't believe you closed down a pharmaceutical company that was making jobs. I can't believe Manchin let that happen.
Well, that pharmaceutical company
was owned by his daughter, and she moved into China.
CEO. I mean, never forget, open for business, Joe Manchin, and what happened with the EpiPen. You had his wife working to lobby Congress to make sure everybody bought EpiPens. You had his daughter raising the price and changing the expiration time on EpiPens. And you had him voting for it and lobbying his other members of Congress. The EpiPen scandal is basically the Joe Manchin family scandal, if you ask me. One of the major things that people need to remember. So when you have those
along with his his son who owns the power company that uses the dirtiest coal possible to burn.
I'm telling you, this has been the issue. Joe Manchin wants West Virginia open for business because Joe Manchin is a West Virginia businessman. He lives in D.C. most of the time, driving his Maserati, going out on his $1 million yacht, and he's laughing at everybody back in West Virginia. I live in Joe Manchin's county. I live 7 miles from where his mother lived in the last days of her life. I drive by these areas, and people here still think Joe Manchin has their back. Here's the thing. Here's why I bring that up. The new people who have taken over the party, they have all of Joe Manchin's negative qualities and none of Joe Manchin's charisma. Nobody in West Virginia thinks Mike Pushkin has their back, okay? Nobody in West Virginia goes out here, not the regular everyday people. They don't know the leaders now, and you got them acting like they're Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is, listen, I don't like him. It's a terrible thing, what he's done to this party, but you have to understand, the power that he accrued here, the power that he amassed, it can't be understated. So these people have come in to take over his party and think that they've got his power. He used the party as part of his machine to give himself power and money. The party, he's like a vampire. He drained the party of all of its energy, of all of its life, and then left it abandoned, right? That's what Joe Manchin has done. So these people who took over the party, they're under the impression they've got the Joe Manchin power. They don't. But there is, however, an opportunity here in West Virginia to take and rebuild a Democratic Party that has the interests of labor, the working class, the working poor, all of that in mind moving forward. We don't have to keep doing the same thing. And the simple fact is that the new regime in West Virginia is backed by, reset. In West Virginia, I can verify this at least. In West Virginia, the person that I'm talking about here a lot of the times, the Rules and Bylaws chair, the Affirmative Action chair, Selena Vickers, was the person who took the challenges to the DNC in 2020 in the first place that led to the creation of the Affirmative Action Committee in West Virginia, okay? In 2021, a member of that committee, the Rules and Bylaws Committee, was heard at a subcommittee meeting of the Affirmative Action Committee admitting, Mary Ann Claytor, chair of the Black Caucus, reported this the day after in an email, admitting that he had advised the then secretary of the AAC, Selena Vickers, on how to outvote Mary Ann Claytor, Seth, and the rest. Ostensibly talking about the racial minorities who were raising hell because we were being excluded from different groups. Mm-hmm. This is the person who sent the challenge that got the caucuses formed, the person who signed who helped vote on that decision to allow that to happen, now coming in at a meeting, admitting to working against the elected members of that committee and silencing them. What kind of collusion is going on between the DNC and state parties? And I'm not necessarily saying it's all the way around. This could be rogue Harold Ickes, member of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, doing all of this, and then being, because they don't want scandal, they don't want to deal with it, we're being pushed off to the side now. The issue is that what we're talking about isn't petty. It's not personal. We're talking about real systemic problems. We're talking about real evidence that we have of this inappropriate behavior and procedural misconduct and targeted harassment, discrimination. We have the proof. It's just a matter now of making people care and bringing this issue out. No one in media has covered this. Here's another funny one. There was a person who interviewed Mary Ann Claytor, myself, and a few other minorities in, I want to say November, December 2021. She interviewed all of us. She was working on this story. She was very interested. Then one day, I said to Mary Ann, I haven't heard from her for a while. I'm going to write her. When I wrote her, I got an email back that said, I'm sorry, but my editor killed the story. Okay? The editor was or the owner, whichever, I don't know. Anyway, the owner of the institution was Doug Scaff, then Democrat, House Minority Leader, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Look that up. But anyway, he was one of the prominent Democrats elected in West Virginia. He killed that story. A year later, he switched parties and basically fired a lot of his staff, right? We, the marginalized people, we are the canaries in the coal mine.
Mm-hmm.
When we're telling you that somebody is behaving in an inappropriate way, don't assume that we don't understand. Don't assume that we're just angry because we want something that you're just wanting something, affirmative action, whatever. This is how white folks are. And so this is what we have to overcome. Listen and pay attention, because it will benefit everybody whenever you do. Mary Ann Claytor in 2018 warned people about Joe Manchin. She told them before the primary, we could have had Paula Jean Swearingen as our candidate in 2018. Mm-hmm. But no, the party worked for Joe Manchin, spent $100,000 saying he loves Trump, right? And we got Joe Manchin. They shut down Mary Ann Claytor. They shut down Paula Jean Swearingen. Mary Ann is still very active in the Democratic Party. Paula Jean, rightfully, I think, is just taking a step back from it because because she was a federal candidate, the attacks that she endured, unparalleled in anything that anybody else in this party, in this state anyway, has experienced. I mean, we're talking about, I can't even get into it. Just the way that they treat people who want something different than the status quo should tell you all you need to know. Anybody that wants to make a change needs to stick with folks like Mary Ann, Paula Jean, me, when we're out here trying to make these differences. And it's easy to say Democrats are bad, so there's no point. But I would push back and say that this is exactly the time to do that, because they're leeching support from all of these groups that matter. We're the ones who build up this party. We're the ones who prop up this party. And it's time for us to kind of coalesce around this unifying voice of saying, no more. We will no longer accept the way things are, or allow you to use our identities to project this integrity or this moral superiority, but then not follow through on your commitments to us. Well, it's not acceptable.
Have you been noticing on Twitter an account called Back to Brunch? It's a podcast.
No.
I thought I sent it to you. Back to Brunch. They're putting on a big push to get rid of the squad.
Oh, so that was okay. So I didn't notice that was actually a podcast. There's also they're part of a PAC that actually fundraises to target left-center Democrats, right?
Yeah, I think they're the same group.
And you'll notice that those types of people will never be disowned or disavowed by.
Well, what's so fascinating about it is, right? I mean, you already have Democrats in those seats, but they're not happy with them. So now they got to find somebody new, who's more center, who's more reasonable, as they like to say. And that's exactly what they did to Paula Jean. They had to find the more reasonable candidate, and she turned out to be a Republican.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly that is exactly what they want. They do not want a Democratic Party that represents the people. They want a Democratic Party that they control, that they are the head of. You have to understand the way these people act. We're talking about people that really nobody knows. They just have a position within the party. There is a certain attitude that you'll get when you try to approach these people, and I've learned that you'll get disrespected as easily. Anything you say will be met with kind of base level, just disregard for you, a disdain almost. I sent an email talking about the Indigenous Caucus a few years ago, and one of the executive committee members wrote back and asked if we were a legitimate constituency or just a few lost souls wandering in the wilderness. What do you answer to a Democrat who says that to you? And why is there nobody outraged about
whether I'm 3 or 10? It doesn't really matter. I'm part of your constituency. You should be representing my needs.
Right, exactly. And so, but furthermore, we already had been established. We were part of the organization, and even though we had been established, she still wanted to know whether or not we had any legitimacy, or if he had to.
Well, she wanted to make sure that she really had to deal with you. If you were below a certain number, she felt, well, I can just blow them off. If they're above a certain number, well, then I might actually have to say something of placate them a bit.
So this is another thing to take notice. We're talking about racism. There is a committee member here in West Virginia who has, 2 of them have targeted me with explicitly racist attacks or colorist attacks, we'll say, talking about legitimacy in skin color, which is problematic. But this other one, there's a fellow who ran racist ads against his opponent, and he's sitting and holding an officer position, Cody Thompson. He ran ads about his Hispanic opponent, saying he would like to see him working out on the farm for a day. And
I thought it was mowing
really
lawns
strange.
too. He had a lot of mowing lawn comments about him.
Yeah. It was very weird. It was very racial. It was just strange. And it's the way you watch when Democrats want to win, they will fully embrace those racist stereotypes to try to win over white voters. That's where they believe the power lies. That's where they believe legitimate backing comes from. I think that that's a large issue here too. It doesn't matter how much minorities support you if you view minorities as less than. If you view our support as kind of novelty,
necessary evil.
Right, exactly. So we're exposing that at the heart of this party, there is this disparate level. That's the title of my article. You know, I'm not a really big fan of the Dickens novel, but I know a lot of people are familiar with it. So I use that to frame the situation here, because you can see distinctly these two things, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't listen. The reason I hate that novel is because I just don't believe I would never sacrifice myself for a member of the elite myself. That being said, you can see a parallel to the way marginalized people continually sacrifice ourselves for the greater good of the party, but never, ever get anything in return. And at a certain point, something's going to give. And what's that going to be? I don't know.
Well, I think this year it's going to be Biden out.
100. There's almost no chance, in my opinion. Now you wait and see. War is the number one thing that people like to do. If there is not a new offensive push somewhere on the globe by the U.S. Army, U.S. military, I will be thoroughly shocked. You're already seeing the rumblings of it. You're seeing it being set up. It's an election year with a president who is deeply unpopular. Be prepared.
I don't think Biden's going to get popular because of a war.
He won't, but that doesn't mean people won't die because of it.
People might die because of it, but I still don't see him being able to turn that into an election win for him. I think he'll be the first president to start a war and get kicked out, and Trump will muddle through it something, and we'll probably quit it in 2 weeks because he's lost.
Well, that is the thing. I think after Bush weaponized the terror. What was it? The coded level. We're red. We're red. Everybody, like right before the election, we went red, and I'm like, okay, come on. But that's the level that I think we're going to be seeing here, because real policy, when you get down into the heart of it, they're failing, and that's what they've got to distract from. That's what you're going to see. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I just don't think there are enough young people to buy into it for Biden.
There's not. It won't work. It will not work.
The terror level at red is going to be, oh damn, you screwed up again, Biden, you fool.
Right. No, it's not the same situation. Like, I think about this a lot. Since the 2000s, we have seen major changes. I mean, we thought we were at the technological zenith at that moment, but we were far from it. We didn't understand the power of social media, the power of interconnectedness. I think we started seeing the response to 2016 was the response to that interconnectedness. It's hard to connect on social media now. In 2016, I seriously think in 2016, when Mary Ann Claytor became the first African-American to win a statewide contested primary in West Virginia and secure the nomination for state auditor, she did it because we were able to reach so many people through social media. We spent $1,000 on an advertisement, one ad, and it reached, I think it was like 450,000 people in West Virginia. That's unheard of.
Now you know why they turned down the advertising algorithm, to make sure that you have to spend 10 times that.
Exactly, because
that ad became like 0.0001 cent per person seeing it.
Right, exactly, because it was insane. Because I think they did a thing where it was kind of half of it was organic and half of it was boosted. So I think the better it did, the more they pushed it out in the advertising. It was a wild time, but we reached an insane number of people with a really well put together ad that showcased Mary Ann, and we targeted regions in like the southern coal fields where, like, a lot of times Democrats aren't really getting out there. And at that time, people were still hung up on, we got to buy TV ads, we got to buy newspaper ads, and I think Mary Ann was the one who said, let's try Facebook. And we did something that nobody expected it to happen. And because of that, we've secured this position to at least have a say in the conversation, even if we're ignored, pushed to the side. Mary Ann Claytor, still chair of the Black Caucus. I expect to hear an announcement from Mary Ann Claytor any day now about other things that she's going to be doing, which this is like what I'm talking about here. There are still people, despite the fact that we keep getting put down, there are still people out here fighting for the institutional rights of marginalized people. And that's what we have to focus on. Blind loyalty to the Democratic Party, bad idea. Finding legitimate people within, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I don't think...
Well, that's a very good thing.
Right.
And that can lead to further change. Especially if, and she was running for auditor, she could have had a very large impact on where money goes, who's getting contracts, stop a lot of the good old boys from, washing one hand and slipping $50.
Let's just say, okay, let's take a moment here and we'll just say, let's say I was going to run another campaign for somebody running for state auditor. One thing I think that people could really think about, is what the state auditor can do. Okay, so here in West Virginia, I've done a lot of studying on this. We have, there's very little direct action that the auditor can take, but this is a position that is about accountability. Anything the state does in terms of money, we have then the access to audit it, and honestly, with a little bit of discretion. So if let's say the DHHR is spending money on a program, we can then go in and analyze that program too. We can request that data and do an audit on the results or whatever, because they take that state money. It's not just money that can be looked at and audited by a state auditor.
Oh, no.
And then you could take these recommendations from distilling that information to the legislature and to the people. Mm-hmm. If you had an auditor who would directly address the people, let's say every few weeks, every month, they had a standing time that they met with the press to disseminate information about their office's findings and what they should do moving forward. That's the kind of that's what we really need to do, is because accountability for the electeds and for where we're spending our money, what we're doing as a government, that's what's most important. And honestly, it's so opaque in most situations where people don't have that information. Like, to bring it back, like when I'm talking about Selena Vickers' PAC having a meeting, I don't know what goes on there. What if there was a way for me to get that information? I become empowered to tell the story more appropriately. I become empowered to demand action for something that was done inappropriately. So let's take that back to the government level where we're spending our money. You find a problem, and it's glaringly obvious when you've done the right analysis. Presenting that to people and suggesting ways to mitigate the issues that you found, that's going to be key. And right now, you don't see that a lot. I think that we could have a situation sometime soon in West Virginia where we could have that type of leadership, where we could have a kind of new take and inspire others. There was a woman, I want to say in Ohio, maybe not a woman, there was somebody who a few years ago developed a program for their state and their auditing, kind of a transparency portal, if you will. A lot of states have been going through and getting contract to buy that software to use in their states. It's propagating. These ideas, once they're explored, once they're established, other states will start to follow, right? So we need to start building these movements around these kind of the smaller level offices, right? So like if you've got Mary Ann, if she were to run for state auditor, having somebody like that to hold a large office, holding other electeds accountable through data and facts, that could revolutionize just empowering people to get out to the poll, to demand action, to let them know what is it that we want. You see a lot of problems. Hey, I know there's a problem, but I don't necessarily know how to fix it, so I trust my leaders. What if there's a leader who comes to you and says, here's the problem, here's why it's a problem, and also here's my suggested solution, and starts advocating that in a very public way?
No, it would be a radical change. to have someone in those low positions that are usually not seen and are put, let's be honest, most of the state officials in those positions are trying to get to some other position that they feel is better, so you go from state auditor to like attorney general and then up the ladder. But we need good state auditors because we need them to really look into these things and really be able to, as you say, give the people the tools for accountability.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head. Most people, first of all, half the states don't elect their state auditor. It's an appointed position.
I know.
Okay. So just overall, generally speaking, people don't appreciate that particular office and what it could be, right? It's just kind of flies under the radar. And like you said, a lot of people who go into it, they'll come with the financial transparency aspect, but they're biding their time to run for a larger office. J.B. McCuskey, the current auditor in West Virginia, everyone said when he first ran, this is him trying to get up to the governor. And I think he may have suspended his gubernatorial campaign this year because there's clearly a lot of competition. He might not have. I really don't pay attention to him, but he did have one. And that was his goal. And that will be his goal moving forward. I guarantee it, because he is a politician at heart. His dad was a politician. That's what he does. So not having a politician, somebody who really cares about these positions, that's what we got to look for. So many people view every office as a stepping stone in their career. Nobody views it as just public service. Mm-hmm. Having somebody dedicated to the position is really important. And, you see it time. I would say, look at your city council, county commission, that kind of thing. Those are the people that a lot of times, well, some of these county commissioners really like getting in there just to make their mark in their county. But whenever you run for office, you'll get this a lot of times. Like when Mary Ann ran for auditor the first time, she had a lot of people contacting her saying, well, why don't you run for Charleston City Council first? These lower positions, let's get you into something and then we'll kind of work our way up and up the ladder. But you know what? That's not always, that kind of establishes this hierarchy that says, oh, well, people in the party get preference. You got to work your way up. And it just kind of creates this barrier that shouldn't be there, because if you're a good candidate for a position and run for it. Now, listen, I will be the first to say I get worried whenever somebody new pops up and the first thing they want to do is run for a big office. U.S. Senate. I've never ran for any office before, but I know I can be the best U.S. Senator. Okay, I get that. That's a legitimate possible concern, sure. But whenever it's not a prominent position, let's say somebody's like, I really want to be, state auditor or the school board on the school board. These kind of things, you can see that there's not so much prestige with it. And that's whenever I think you can start analyzing and really saying, okay, well, it doesn't matter if this person's new. Are they good? Because what we really want to see is outsiders coming into the system to run. I mean, we want people who aren't connected to party leaders to be the ones to win nomination. And then we want to see party leaders embrace those folks and push for them to win elections, because it's this insular nature of the party, both parties, that creates a lot of the problems. It's the fact that they want to secure these positions for themselves, their friends, and everybody, and people that they know and like, whenever these parties are meant to be a place for us all to come together and build the government and the representation that we want to see and organize around that. It's not, the party itself is just a vehicle, but I think a lot of people get in here and it becomes a club. And we got to fight that mentality. And the only way to do that is to get more people involved and for shorter periods of time. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of term limits because of the way that our systems are set up. And I just don't like a lot of the discourse surrounding it. But at the end of the day, for certain situations, we're going to need to get some replacements in, especially like when we're talking about state executive committee. Why anyone would want to be a committee member for decades is beyond me in the first place. We need fresh ideas, especially when parties fail.
It seems like it's a very good position to be the head of the state party, picking out everyone. You don't necessarily have to be elected by anyone, just a small caucus election that you can probably win very easily with limited resources spent. And you get to choose how the party shapes their elections for the next 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, I think I can see why you'd want to be it.
Well, yeah, no, I see why they do it. I'm saying, like,
I know you do, but I was just saying to the audience that, to me, It's like the ultimate Machiavellian position, right? You have a ton of power, very little oversight with the general public. And as long as you don't get caught with your head in the cookie jar, you pretty much can do whatever you want.
How many people even know who their state party chair is? I mean, it's just it's
not many.
Considering how much power they wield and how they shape policy and how they shape the entire organization of the party, it really is something that should be more prominent. It should be more. I mean, listen, Selena Vickers is spending thousands and thousands of ostensibly her own money, at least according to the reports, to influence her committee. Why? If it didn't have anything, if it didn't have any power, if it was unimportant, why would they do that? So if we can organize for free and take the thousands of dollars that these people are spending and make it a waste, how beautiful is that? If nothing else, that's a wonderful thing. They can't keep buying their way into these positions and buying support. At a certain point, if we're serious about changing things, we have to address that. And so that's my call to action, so to speak, is that people need to really pay attention to these lower level things. It is not all senator, it is not all governor, it's not all president. Things that are boring are probably impacting your life more than you realize.
Oh, I think that is definitely the message we have to get across in grassroots activism. The problem with the Green Party is that it shoots for these positions that it's not going to get. We have to run a presidential campaign. No, you should be running in New York. You should be running every low-level campaign you can find. From the dog catcher up to like student up to the school board, because you're going to win those, and you're going to change how money's spent right on the ground level there, and you're going to change people's real lives, and people are going to look at you and say, well, this party can do stuff. This party can get it done. And then when you run your next campaign for, like state, county officials, state officials, people start to say, okay, they're doing it. I mean, obviously we don't have that much time, unfortunately, because we crapped it away from the 1980s on. But that to me is the strategy that's going to win. I mean, it's one for the Republicans. I mean, the reason why there's Tea Party caucuses and MAGA is because they sat large donations, got on the ground, and won small campaigns first, and then eventually they got the right moment, and bam, they blew up with the right people.
I think a lot of that, I mean, just to be honest, is that when you're talking politics, when you're talking about the culture of politics, in order to feel relevant, I think that's why they think they have to run a presidential candidate, is because they want to be part of the conversation. You're not running a big organization like that they should, I'm not wrong, to run these and win these smaller elections. You're wanting to build this brand that you think will help you win more small elections, I guess. I mean, I could see the thinking behind it, but I agree in that it's not necessarily beneficial. Like, look at how they've been treated in the discourse around presidential politics. They're treated as this horrible spoiler. And if Joe exactly. And nobody takes them seriously at this point. But winning elections and building this power behind them is a great way to get started. But like you said, we're in a situation now where I don't know where things go. I've always been one of the most positive, optimistic people when looking at the future. But we're really in a situation where a lot of the information, polling, whatever you want to say, the numbers coming out when you look at when you look at different issues, it's very concerning. We're fractured as a people, and not just left, right. It's no longer just two things. I mean, we're fractured in many different ways with people. I mean, I just don't see any reconciliation through normal means now. I don't see the Congress and the president having a big kumbaya moment and it really impacting the lives of everyday people. It's going to take real work to prevent the worst things from happening. It really is. And I think that complacency has become commonplace, and we're so used to things. Oh, this is always the most important election. Well, they keep getting more important. I don't know what to tell you, because people are really, we keep getting worse and worse in terms of our cohesion and our unity as a country, which is very important to maintain that identity. I'm not talking about nationalism here. I'm talking about just living, right? Just having basic human respect for one another, not as an ideology, but just the fact that we can't even get there. So our policies are fractured because we ourselves have become fractured. And a lot of that comes from the politicians in their attempts to push their own agendas. They put out this inflammatory rhetoric, the misinformation from the media, everything kind of plays into it. And we need to become laser focused, those of us who are media literate and who are able to voice ourselves in this way, communicate well with others. We have got to keep pushing through everything they put at us to get out there with our story and to get out there and make these changes, because if we don't, then the next thing we're going to be preparing for is not going to be a meeting, if you catch my drift. It's that dire. We're at that level. We don't have 10 years left in us going this way.
No, we don't
believe it.
Well, we already got one senator calling for the national divorce. MTG. Was it MTG?
And people support that. I mean, you'll even catch Democrats or liberals, progressives, whatever you want to call them, who say, well, yeah, let's just cut off the red states. That would solve all of our problems. They're the takers anyway. And I'll tell you something, that's fallacious thinking, because places like West Virginia, we might take more federal money, but we send massive amounts of money to the bank accounts of people living in the Hamptons because of the extraction that goes on under our feet. So don't think that you're going to write off red states and then just have this utopia of having everything. You exploit red states a lot of the time, and that's why we're red. Okay. It's been this way since, we've been dealing with this as a country, the history. You can watch it unfold. And this is the part where we're at now, is where we've kind of sacrificed rural and red states to the greater good, so to speak, to allow this extraction, to allow this exploitation, or maybe some places are just flyover states that don't have much besides agriculture, whatever it is. They were deemed not important enough, and that's got to change. We've got to start engaging those people there, because if people are smart enough in blue states to understand this, and if I'm smart enough in Trump country to understand this, other people are too. The failure is on you for not reaching them with a message that resonates. And it's because you don't take the time to understand the people here, because you have decided not worth it. We can keep winning without them. But you're fracturing the country, and you're risking so many people's lives in the process. And the stability of everything moving forward. It's short-sighted. It's been like writing on the wall for a while now. How long do we have to keep going down this road pretending that things are the same before we start actualizing change?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the big problem. That kind of thinking, and it's been the strategy of failure, basically. Sure, we win, the office of the president, but then you don't have the Congress to back it up. You don't have the state houses, so they just reduce everything you've done at the state level, and then you lose the Supreme Court because you spent 50 years fighting on, well, you got to have those judges to keep Roe versus Wade. Well, people got tired of it, and we lost.
We lost. We totally lost. And people should take a moment, take a step back. I remember, what was it? Was it the Republicans in 2008 did a whole big push about their post-mortem, an autopsy on the election. It was a big media push because it wasn't just for internal audiences. It was for everybody, to kind of get everybody back on the same page as a Republican. And that's kind of what we need to see here, is that kind of a taking a step back and really analyzing, okay, well, let's not just blame dumb voters for not realizing how great we are. Let's take a second to look at our policies, the real impact that they're having, especially among those people that are the most loyal to the Democratic Party, and seeing how we kind of align ourselves to our ideals and our rhetoric with our actions. And holding people accountable is the only way to do that. So
that we definitely have to hold them accountable, but we also have to provide results. That's the other part.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are no results. We saw when they first came in, they had an opportunity. They didn't like Trump. A lot of people were done with Trump, and they had an opportunity. Had they just sent out those $2,000 checks and passed minimum wage we honestly probably wouldn't be having a lot of the disillusionment we have right now, because those two immediate things right away set the stage for opposition, for that conflict within, right? Because
disappointment.
Because they couldn't even uphold their promises to the people who elected them. This wasn't a fight between Democrats and Republicans. They jumped in, and the first thing they did was say, let's start problems with our constituents that elected us. Doesn't make any sense.
No, it didn't.
So
that was a very poor plan on their part to renege on the 2000, because to do it, they had to claim that Trump gave them a certain amount of it, and that made him look good.
They literally,
because his portion was bigger than their portion.
You can't say this plus that equals this. They had ads that showed a $2,000 check going out the door if they voted for those senators in Georgia. They had that. Then you go back on it. You can't have that visual of $2,000. People don't say, "Oh, well, yeah, that makes sense because altogether it's $2,000, right?" They say, "Hey, you showed me a check for $2,000 because everybody needed that money." And these people who are sending the money out, I apologize for my bird. The people sending the money out do not realize that or don't care, or maybe the fact is that they don't need the $2,000, so they're thinking it's petty. I don't know.
No, I don't know either, but I know this. It's even worse to make it part of the guy that you're campaigning against, that he's already giving a certain amount of money to you, because you're trying to one up him in a campaign.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, the fact that Trump is even the presumptive nominee at this point really shows a failure of Democrats to discredit everything he's done. Instead, his fans are even more supportive, and he's actually making gains in other areas. The Democrats dropped the ball. All of this is their fault, leadership's fault. And like I said, look at my story. Look at what's happening in West Virginia and Alabama, and see that it's because the party itself doesn't have a center. It doesn't have a vision of what it really wants to be. It's kind of just here and now, making sure we've got what's ours. And I think that we really need to get past that and get to the point where people are like, okay, what is it that we need in order to make the most successful policy to make the world really a better place for the constituents who we need to elect us? You can have all the power, you can make all the money you want personally, but at a certain point, you're setting everybody else up for failure. And that's not okay. That's what my point is that I understand why all of these people are doing this. It is nefarious. It is for personal gain, a lot of it. But I understand where that comes from. I mean, it's a scary world out there. They're securing theirs, and that's what they're doing. But we can't allow it. We must not allow these things to continue, and we have to start pushing back. And people in West Virginia, especially, if you're a Democrat on the executive committee, there's a chance you're watching this. And I would just say that stand up. When the tide turns and you were on the right side of history, everything they will take from you will be restored and then some. You will have the ability to say, "I was always right," rather than being someone who's going with the current of whatever is happening right now. That's not the way to be a leader. And in that position that you have taken on the role of representative of those people that are under you in your area, and you are a leader just by virtue of your position. So you must demonstrate leadership and stand up to those who are keeping marginalized people down, keeping the party from being the best it can be, and basically handing the GOP the reins to the government, to this whole entire operation, to allow them to pass policies that kills. I mean, let's just put it that way. People will continue to die so long as you do nothing.
Well, that's very true. I think that what we can say is that the Democratic Party has become the party of the consultant to such a degree that it has lost any sense of real leadership. And when you do that, you just fall apart, because consultants really only care about their paychecks at the end of the day, and they get them no matter what. Whether you win or lose, you're going to pay that consultant because somebody tells you that you can't win an election without them. So you got them. So
one of the things that I do is I have a small business called Political Victory Alliance Consulting Group. I don't advertise to everybody. I'm not trying to take on a lot of clients. I incorporated so that I would have this
tax
so that I can help people like Mary Ann Claytor. My goal is to take people who have come into this, and there's not a lot of people running this year. I've not even done any recruiting because the numbers are abysmal in West Virginia. They're bad. But my goal was and is and will continue to be that small-time candidates who want to get involved, I'm going to offer them my services for basically at cost. I'm not going to make money. I'm not in the position to make money, but I want to use the resources that can be given to a corporation. Like I can get voter vendors and stuff like that, lists from vendors, and have these kind of things set up for candidates who don't have access to it otherwise and who can't afford it otherwise, and then kind of provide that expertise and guidance to navigating.
Well, that's a different kind of consulting than what I'm envisioning. I'm talking about
it's in response to those people. There is an entire economy built around consulting. You're not wrong. The consulting, the printing, the everything that goes along with campaigning.
The super PAC funding.
Yeah, well, that too. It's just about there's so much money that goes through it. I came in 2016 completely green, and one of the first things that I said to Mary Ann Claytor, my boss, and I said, "There's an entire economy around elections that I did not know about. So much money passing hands constantly. Even whenever you think it's the off season, it's not. It's year round, every year, all the time. This is the world they live in. It's not the world that average people live in. And, becoming more aware is a way to help that, help us overcome that. That's all.
Right. And I think that's a great job. I think that's a totally different brand of consulting, not to be confused with the Kensies of the world and those kind of consultants. And we are out of time with our guest today. So I would like to just thank Seth for stopping by. Let him plug whatever he wants before he goes.
Hey, thank you very much. The only thing I really have to plug is go check out my Substack, takeastand.substack.com, whatever. It's called Take a Stand. It's basically you can find out so much information about what's happening in West Virginia and some about what's happening in Alabama. And my goal is to just continue to shine a light on the issues that I personally am witnessing and that I think are being undercovered or that have potential to be of interest to people that just might go under the radar through other means. And I do try to make sure that everything I say has evidence to back it up. I have worked on taking away all of my personal animus towards these things and tried to present it in the most fact-based way that I can. And I really hope that more people will take a look at what my reporting on these issues is firsthand account of my experiences and of those other Democrats in West Virginia who are witnessing for the past 3 years this total takeover and outside influences squashing grassroots activism and leadership. So takeastand.substack. If you want to go read my articles, share them. Send them to some reporters that'd be fine by me, because these stories are independently verifiable and they're not my own, and I would be more than happy to see them being reported elsewhere with or without me mentioned. I don't want the spotlight. I never did. I want things to be operational and things to go the way that they're supposed to go. So,
well, that's true. I as a reader of his Substack, I can wholly recommend it. Very well written, very well researched. I don't know why more people don't click on the links. It bothers the hell out of me when I watch an article and I put all these little things in that prove what I'm saying, and I'm the only one that's pushed the button to make sure they work.
At least they're there. So and maybe it tells people, oh, he linked something, so it must be true. Either way, it's all I try.
Well, so I can understand his statement there. So with that, we're gonna leave you, and hopefully next time we'll have someone like I don't know who we're going to have next time, but we're going to have somebody soon. So I'll leave you with that little tease. Goodbye, everyone.